Okay, everybody, welcome to the ACM Podcast. I am here with the co-founders of the American Conservative Movement. We've got myself, we've got JD Rucker here. JD, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, sir.
Hello, and then we've also got one of the other co-founders, Pastor Sam Jones. Sam, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is my first time actually on the ACM, so
yeah,
podcast.
That is true. So welcome, not back, just welcome. And so our other co-founder is Ken Peters. He wasn't able to be here because he's actually on a different podcast right now. I'm sure talking about probably some similar topics and that sort of thing. But you know, the main reason why we wanted to jump on here and kind of, you know, have a little conversation is because for a lot of you guys have seen that President Trump had a press conference today. He only spoke for like a minute and a half, maybe max. And he came out and made the announcement that he's calling for all churches to be able to be reopened effective this weekend. And essentially, he told the governors, if you have a problem, you can call me, but you're not going to get anywhere. And then he said that if the governors resist, he's going to override them. Very interesting developments and kind of encouraging for a lot of us, you know, Christians and conservatives and that sort of thing. Sam or JD, what are your guys' thoughts on this?
Oh, you go ahead, Sam.
Oh, I was going to say you go ahead, but no. Well, first of all, from a constitutional perspective, I mean, this is awesome. He's defending the First Amendment rights of the churches, and this is huge. You know, it should be even more across the board than just churches being open. But I mean, this is a huge step that somebody is saying, look, churches are essential, and somebody from a position of power. The state that I'm in, Iowa, we actually have had churches open up here. The pastors put a lot of heat, and a few representatives too. I'll give a shout out. Well, maybe I won't, because I guess they were kind of giving heat to the governor behind closed doors. So maybe I shouldn't mention their name. But we was really putting putting it on the governor here to open things up for at least for the churches, especially to call them essential. And a couple weeks ago, the governor came out and said, I can't constitutionally tell churches not to meet anymore, which of course she never could do that at the beginning, but at least there was a recognition of that later on. But here it looks like Trump, who, to my knowledge, never said that churches can't meet, only suggested that they shouldn't meet according to the CDC guidelines, which is a good or a good thing to distinguish there, is now going and saying, you know what, I'm not going to let the governors go and break the Constitution anymore, which is huge. But one thing that's interesting, being in a state that's opened up, like I said, a couple weeks ago, at least towards churches, we're not completely open up or anything like that, is that there are still churches that are choosing not to meet. They're saying, we're not essential. We're not essential. And Trump, one thing that's interesting here about President Trump is that he, in his statement here in the article that I read from Fox News, he basically says it's because of prayer, because we need prayer right now, which is absolutely huge. And he understands this idea of churches meeting together in the essentialness of prayer and worship, which is absolutely incredible. And I just want to point this out because this blows my mind. A man who's a serial adulterer who went out and paid a prostitute, Stormy Daniels, and then got his money back, which is kind of an ironic, funny thing there in one sense. But a man who isn't known for his morality recognizes the essentialness of churches more than a lot of pastors do. That tells you a lot about the state and the culture of the churches right now. But that's not the big story. Although if pastors don't open up about this, you'll kind of know your pastor's theology is pretty messed up.
No, that's a very interesting take on that. You know, and what was interesting was, you know, at the end of his statement, he said we need more prayer, not less prayer. And it's like, you know, when you think about it, when's the last time you actually heard a president of the United States say something like that?
Yeah, it's been a while. It used to be commonplace. They used to go and call national days of prayer and repentance. Trump actually did that. President Trump did that a couple months ago. which is, it feels like a couple months ago anyway. Maybe it was less than that. Coronavirus has me messed up my calendar, so sorry if I'm a little wrong on that time frame. But yeah, I mean, this is huge, and he's right. We do need prayer right now, and we need repentance.
No, absolutely. Now, JD, if we can talk a little bit about the constitutional, side of all this, because I think we all agree, here, with the three of us here, that that the shutdown of churches in and of itself is totally unconstitutional. So obviously it's good that Trump came out and did it, but at the same time, we're over 2 months in, and it's kind of late. So how do we as conservatives, do we congratulate? Do we say this was too late, too little, too late? How do we handle this?
So I wouldn't, anything like this, we cannot look at it from the perspective of the negative, I guess you could say, the bad, because this is an unambiguous good. There's a lot of people who are promoting, for example, the federalism aspect of it. No, even the Fox News article that Pastor Sam had referenced, they even noted, the president said that he's going to make the override the governors. Well, how? And they're like, how can you possibly do that? And the answer to that is that this isn't a case of federalism. This isn't an instance of 10th Amendment primacy or anything like that. This is an instance where they are defying a constitutional right, and therefore he can take the DOJ. He has the power to take the DOJ and to hold them accountable. I don't think he's going to go that far. I don't think he's going to start filing charges against governors. I think he's going to use another variation of federalism, which will be to basically promote or force their hand by taking away federal funds if necessary for certain reasons. And that too is within his power. And even though the radical judiciary is going to fight him on that, and there will be someone who's going to say, no, you can't do that, no, you can't do that, yada, yada, yada. It's going to make it all the way up. And in reality, he does have that power. So we can't throw federalism at that. As much as I would like to say, look, let the governors do what the governors are going to do. The governors should let cities do what they're going to do. In this particular case, once you're defying as an elected official, once you're defying a constitutional right, in this case the First Amendment, you cannot. You're throwing out federalism completely. Okay, you're being a tyrant. You're opposing the Constitution, and somebody, a higher authority, in this case the President of the United States and the Department of Justice, need to do something about it. Now, but let's go back to your original question. You said, should we be happy? I mean, should we be concerned that it's taken so long? To some extent, yes. But I will give the president, in this case, a pass for certain aspects of it. He has been getting bad advice. He's been getting bad advice from the beginning, in my opinion. Not just from the known culprits, Dr. Fauci and such, but also from people within his administration who have tried to guide him from a political perspective. Mr. President, this is an election year. You might want to do this, but you shouldn't do this, and yada, yada, yada. This is a bad political move. People will say, oh, but this is going to energize the base. Great. Got that. He has plenty of time to energize the base. That's not something that you need to do this early on. What it will do is it will energize the opposition. They're going to say, especially if that second wave comes, and especially if they can start tying things to churches opening up and people dying, this is a very risky political move on his part. And that's why I think that he hasn't done it. This is why I give him a pass, because he's had people in his ear saying, look, if you start to exert your power over states, and if you start forcing churches, forcing them to allow churches to open up, and then this second wave coronavirus or people, anecdotally, people are dying as a result, you're putting your reelection in jeopardy. But I think he's finally starting to listen to his base again, and they're saying, Mr. President, we got your back. We need this. If you really want to help the nation, forget about the reelection. If you want to save this nation, we need prayer. We need the churches to be open. We need fellowship. We can't just be out there on telechurch or whatever you want to call it. That might be great for some people, and I totally understand those who are vulnerable not wanting to go to church and just watching online or on their phones or whatever. But for those of us who crave, who need who need to feel that energy in the church, who need to feel feel the camaraderie and to engage in group prayer, that is more important than any political considerations that any president can make. So no, I'm not upset that the president waited so long. I'm glad that he had the courage to do this now, and I think that's a blessing to him and to the United States.
Yeah, that's a very good point, a very good way to put it. And I think, also I wanted to kind of, head over to Sam here really quick as well, of talking about the need to understand the church as an essential. And, obviously there's the constitutional aspect of it. It's protected by the Constitution. A lot of leftists don't even really believe in the Constitution, right? So if we're going to make the case that church should be essential, maybe we're using the Constitution, maybe we're not. But you as a pastor, how do we make the case that this is necessary and essential for our country?
Yeah, so that's a great question here, and I think there are actually, like you said here, there are two sides to it because of the nation that we're in. You could be in communist China, you could be anywhere you want to be, and the church is still essential, and that's because righteousness exalts a nation, and sin is a reproach to any people. And so the church is an essential no matter what on the spiritual idea and the spiritual sense. And that idea, and when it comes to the ecclesiastical law, it doesn't matter what the governors say, it doesn't matter what the presidents say, it doesn't matter what a king or a dictator or anybody else says. You ought to obey God rather than man. And I think that's a pretty easy idea and concept to understand. Some people really aren't understanding that, but the other thing to look at this here is, like you said, the constitutional perspective. And this is the thing that actually it'll be interesting to see how the liberals take it, but I think that this is more the secular conservatives who have an issue with this, who just simply don't know the Constitution that well. The church is an essential, according to the Constitution. There's a reason why religious liberty is in the First Amendment, and it's not just the idea of not elevating one religion above another or one denomination above another and things like that in the First Amendment, but it is the free exercise thereof. Our nation was founded upon this exact religious liberty in realizing that we needed help from God Almighty in order to beat the biggest bully on the block in the British. They were the superpower at the time. We had no chance whatsoever to win, and our founding fathers turned to God. Whether people like that or not, whether people agree with it or not, the history is history, facts are facts. That's what it is, and our founding fathers realized that. And the people who don't believe in God, they might sit out there and say, well, this is just a fairy tale, make-believe, whatever it is. But it actually is a historical fact that the founding fathers turned to God, and therefore they came out and they put this in the Constitution in the First Amendment, saying we are going to limit our government, that they cannot take these rights away. And so if people have an issue with this from a secular standpoint, and like I said here, whether they do or not, it shouldn't change Christians' point of view. But if the secular people have an issue with this from a standpoint, they ought to take it up with the Constitution, not with the people of the United States.
Yeah, and either one of you guys can kind of answer this question, but from like a constitutional perspective, is there ever a time when you could see the government being able to come in and, let's say, take away a constitutional right, even if it's temporarily? Because that's one of the arguments that's being made in relation to churches, is that these are extenuating circumstances. This is like an extreme situation, and it's so that way we can keep people safe and we can shut down this virus. So could you ever foresee a time where it's like, okay, we actually do need to have an exception here?
I'll go ahead and just throw a quick answer out before Sam. Let's say a coronavirus comes and it kills. It has a 30% mortality rate. Okay, maybe we should consider more drastic measures. This one, if you look at the infectious rate right now, okay, for every 10,000 people that have been infected, I'm not talking about who have been, confirmed cases. I'm talking about people who have been in contact with the disease. They have had either the disease in their body now, or they have antibodies which indicate that they have had the disease in their body. They have been infected. For every 10,000 of those people, you're looking at 1 to 2 deaths. That is not a justification to shut down a barber shop, let alone a constitutionally protected church. Now, let's say for every 10,000 people infected, 3,000 die. Okay, I can see that as being an extreme enough case to consider temporary measures to do something. But keep in mind, if that were the case, then we would be dealing with much bigger issues than not being able to go to church. Churches would be getting burnt down. The entire nation would be in such turmoil that the Constitution almost wouldn't exist. So the correct answer, I guess you could say, is no. There is no real case, because any case that would allow that would change the calculus so badly that we probably would need to be under martial law. And I'm saying this as somebody who would never allow martial law over me, willingly, and yet I could foresee this really odd situation. Nuclear bombs coming down, aliens landing, or a 30% death rate of a highly infectious disease that's spreading across the nation rapidly.
So a couple things. One, actually, we are seeing churches being burnt down, which is kind of interesting.
Mississippi.
Yeah. Kind of I don't say that laughingly, but it's like, what in the world is going on here? But the other thing is, constitutionally, the only thing that would permit this is war, and to suspend rights. And as JD said, that would then require martial law, which I'm not even sure that I agree with the Constitution on this principle, just as JD said here. But according to letter of the law, that would be what it would be, or what it would take, which is something that we need to be concerned about right now. Is when people start using, like Dr. Fauci, even Trump did this, President Trump did this at the beginning of this whole thing, is say that we're at war with the coronavirus, we're at war with these kind of things. And the danger with those words is that then they could use this as a suspension of our rights, saying that, look, we're at war. The problem is that's a postmodern take, because obviously it's a figurative speech that we're at war. We're not actually at war, or people who believe that we're actually at war don't understand that words have meaning, and we're going against that. So it's definitely a postmodern philosophy that's coming out here in these kind of things. But that's why it's important that we understand these principles, because and understand our Constitution is just as JD was saying here. The only thing that can really constitute this of our rights being suspended would be being put under martial law, and that can only happen in a time of war.
Yeah, and I think that this like, we'll call it quarantine, even though we all agree it's not an actual quarantine, but this whole response to the coronavirus, I think has really showed how vulnerable we are as Americans, and how far we've allowed the progressives and the leftists to take us, where for however many weeks, it was many weeks, there was almost no resistance to these measures, and then all of a sudden it's like 2 months in and everybody's like, okay, this is enough. It's fascinating to me that it took 2 months for people to be like, yeah, this doesn't seem right, and I wonder, does that mean that the progressives and the leftists have been winning this ideological war for quite a while?
I would say that I was extremely disappointed and very shocked as well by exactly what you're describing. I would say that a lot of it is just comes down to complacency. It has been now approximately 18 years, since we've had that true surge. I mean, I grew up during the Cold War. We were always on edge. There was always news of something bad that was potentially going to happen. Fast forward into, then there was Y2K, which was a joke, of course, but then 9/11 happened. And for a time, we were energized. We were regrouped. We were patriotic. Democrats were being patriotic, if you can remember back then. Back then it wasn't a bad thing to wave the American flag. In fact, it was a good thing to even leftists and many progressives. So I would say that a lot of it is complacency. A lot of it we were caught off guard. A lot of it, is just a matter of people buying into the fear. Do I think that the progressives are winning with their ideology? No. But if we're looking at this from an information wars perspective, I think that their propaganda is winning. I think that they have indoctrinated their youth to the point that they have become the louder of the people. Do I think they have a majority now? Absolutely not. But do I think that was I surprised and very disappointed in the number of patriots who actually recognized from the beginning, or we'll say the near beginning. We'll give everybody a 3-week window. Okay, when President Trump came out on March 16th and said on Jeff's birthday and said that we're going to 2 weeks to slow the burn or burn the curve or whatever it was, slow the spread. I think most Americans, including conservatives, were like, all right, 2 weeks, fine. But after that, once you get to that 2.5 week, 3 week period, at that point, if you are a patriotic, lucid, constitutional conservative, that's the point where you start saying, okay, now this is going too far. And then you start seeing things coming from the governors and the mayors, and you say, this is definitely going too far. We need to act. I am disappointed that there were too few people who, at that point, at the 3 week mark, by the beginning of the second week of April, that's when I think there should have been a massive, massive response from a majority of Americans. And here we are in the end of May, and there still hasn't been a massive response. There are still many, many patriotic or claiming to be patriotic Americans who are living in fear. And not only that, they're going after other patriots who aren't living in fear. It's like, how dare you not live your life in fear like I am? That's not the right way to look at these things. But that's what's happening. And it has been the good news, the silver lining, this is a wake-up call. We at the ACM, patriots across this nation, we got our work cut out for us. It is not going to be nearly as easy. This coronavirus crisis has exposed the level of patriotism, the level of constitutionalism that is in America, and it's not as much as I would have thought.
You look at it here. 4 years ago, we had the trifecta, or got the trifecta as Republicans, where we have the House, Senate, and President of the United States, and we see that we won all these elections, and yet we're still losing. How in the world does that happen? Well, it's because we're not in a prototypical war, obviously, with guns and bullets. We're not in a war of even elections. And, JD said that he grew up in the Cold War. Well, I grew up watching documentaries on the Cold War, a little bit different in age there. But we're in, much like the Cold War, we're in an information war as to what's going on here. And one thing that I like to tell people is that the difference between Nazi Germany and America is that America today is that we pay for our propaganda, whereas in Nazi Germany had their propaganda forced upon them. We pay it. It's called a cable bill. And people go and they turn on mainstream news, even Fox News, which we know is by far the best out of the mainstream ones. But they're pushing propaganda too, just as JD pointed out in that article. They said, by what authority should President Trump be able to hold the governors accountable? Well, it's called the Constitution. Have you never heard of that? That's how he's going to say. First Amendment, read it? It's good. You should have it. Probably even buy him a pocket constitution or something like that, and hand it out to the liberal media. If he did that, like, that is a boss move. He needs to do that right there. Just go Ben Shapiro on Pierce Morgan on that. And that's the thing here is that right now we're losing the information war. We need to start winning this information war, which means that, quit listening to mainstream media news and even Fox News. Limit yourself on that. It's okay to go and read an article or something like that from there, but they don't really come from a right worldview most of the time. And the problem is that people get sucked down this and all these kind of things, and they get swayed back and forth by just what the media is saying. And so this is why something like the American Conservative Movement is absolutely needed and essential, because the way we're going to win isn't by getting the trifecta. It's not by getting the most Republicans in. That's great. I mean, that's good to get a lot of Republicans in. But we did that in 2016. And 4 years later, while we have 2/3 of the power, by the way, we're still getting our rear end kicked. How in the world does that happen? Well, it's because we need to get the right Republicans. We need to get real conservatives. And the only way we're going to do that is by getting people informed and educated to know what in the world's going on, and then to get people fired up and say, you know what, I'm going to run for that position because I'm going to hold up the Constitution and live by those principles.
Yeah, I mean, like for me personally, I can't remember the last time that I actually watched TV news, whether it was cable, mainstream, whatever it was. Like, at the most, maybe I'll go check out their social media page or YouTube page if they have like an interview. I care about the interviews. But ultimately, when it comes back to it, it takes a little bit more work on my part. But it's like, I'd rather go to the source. Like, I want to read the actual law. I want to see the actual speech. I don't want to hear what somebody says about the speech because it's always wrong. Like, every single time, left, right, whatever it is, it's always wrong. And that's the fascinating thing about all this.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yep.
The only interviews that you should ever listen to are the interviews done on Freedom One-on-One with Jeff Dornik, the new podcast on the Freedom First Network.
Hey, I'll take it.
Just saying.
I'll take it. I think
those interviews rock.
Oh yeah, of course. It's all me. No, it's clearly not. But the one thing I wanted to point out too is that, and this kind of correlates with what we're seeing with the government overreach and overreaction by shutting down churches and things like that, is we're seeing people like Gavin Newsom and even Joe Biden and some of these guys are literally talking about hijacking the coronavirus crisis into creating a new America and taking things more progressive, more leftist, and making a lot of these changes permanent. And I think that's extremely, extremely concerning. But it's what's fascinating to me is that they're coming right out and saying it. They're not even like hiding it like what they used to. They're just flat out saying, this is an opportunity for us to make America more progressive. And it's like, no cover up, no, I don't have to go digging. I don't have to, look at your connections and connect the dots. And like, they're just flat out saying it. I just the video of Joe Biden this morning, literally saying like, hey, we can implement laws. We can fundamentally change. We can change healthcare. We can change our system. We can change everything. That's scary. I mean, JD, like, do you feel like there's an opportunity for them to actually fundamentally change America right now?
Well, America is going to is already fundamentally changed. Okay, a lot of the slate has been wiped by the coronavirus. There's no going back in certain ways. Okay, and that's not about if we return everything. You open up the country today completely. Okay, if you take away all the lockdowns, remove every single law, every single mandate, every single executive order that was placed as a result of the coronavirus, and you do a complete reset to the way things were back in, we'll say January. Well, guess what? America is still and already has been fundamentally changed. There's still going to be, Sam noted earlier, before we came on, there are churches that are not open and that have the ability to open and that still refuse to open. Okay, there are going to be business owners who will either not open, or if they do open, they're going to have to do it at a different scale because, just like for restaurants, one of the ideas of restaurants is that you kind of cram as many people in as you can, right? Well, that's not going to be the case anymore. People won't go to a restaurant. A lot of people, I would, but a lot of people wouldn't go to a restaurant if they have to sit 3 feet from the next person, right? So, yes, America has already been fundamentally changed. What the Democrats are saying is that, now that the slate has been wiped somewhat, what are we going to put on it when we get our chance? What are we going to take? What are we going to do next with this clean slate? How are we going to recreate the new normal? And this goes back to what Sam was saying about the information wars. Okay, Democrats, you said that Jeff, you said that they're just coming out and saying it. We need to come out and say it. We need to come out and say, look, we need to, when the dust starts to settle, we need to do everything we can. We need to fight with everything we've got to make sure that the Democrats don't fundamentally change things in a negative way, because they're going to take this clean slate and try to expand upon it. They're going to take their authoritarianism and try to make it bigger. They're going to take their tyranny and try to make it the standard operating procedure. Okay. They have their vision of the new normal. We need to make our vision of the new normal, which is as close to the old normal as possible. We need to get back to normal, because if we don't, if we start living in this, post-coronavirus world that is earmarked as completely different from how things were before, then we're in big trouble. Because again, we don't have control of the media. We don't have control of the education system. We don't even have control of Hollywood. As conservatives, the only thing we have is the truth, right? So the only thing Democrats have is the control of the dissemination of what they consider to be truth. And that's a very scary thing. I think we can win, but we can't win if there's just not enough patriots out there beating the drum, making the effort, and sticking to this truth that we know to be true.
Yeah. Now, Sam, what do you think is going to be something that we need to be doing in order to get back to, like what JD was saying, like we'll call it the old normal, I guess. Let's say what the founding fathers intended for us. Obviously we're not going to be able to go from 0 to 100 and get there immediately. But what are some of the things that you feel like we need to start really focusing on if we're going to get back to the ideals that America was founded on?
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question. And I'm going to start off to just kind of explain how we're not there. In Iowa, once again, here, we're a little bit ahead of California. For the first time in our life, we're ahead of California. Look at that. And, we've started to open some things back up. And yesterday I went out to eat. I think it was yesterday, maybe it was the day before. It's the day before. But I went out to eat with a friend and went to a restaurant that, been to 100 times, and that place was always packed. Okay. Even at lunch, it's at least, 3/4 full. I mean, it's a pretty full place and hardly anyone's there. Went to a local tea shop that I go to quite a bit and been there a few times. And I mean, it's every afternoon. There, it's minimally 50% full, a lot of times 80 to 100% full. And in there, and you see one table with people there. Now, people are still going and buying stuff. They're just getting it to go. This fundamental change has kind of already come in through the habits of people. But if we're going to get back to the new normal, what we have to find is that virtue. And one of the virtues we need to find is courage. People need to be courageous once again. Could you get coronavirus? Yeah, you could get coronavirus. Could I get coronavirus? Yeah, I could get coronavirus. Would that be a terrible thing? Yeah, it would be a terrible thing. It's also a terrible thing when somebody gets pneumonia, also a terrible thing when somebody gets the flu, terrible when any of those things happen. But we can't live our life in fear, because if we're going to live our life in fear, now we shouldn't be stupid. I'm not saying go lick doorknobs. I'm not saying go and, do dumb things like that. Wash your hands, take normal precautions. But we have to start self-governing. And part of self-governing is actually going out and doing things. As long as we are staying at home and avoiding getting out and doing stuff and living in fear, then the issue is that we're not self-governing. We're letting CNN govern us. And that was never the purpose of the press, was to govern the people. The press is simply to make sure that the truth actually gets out. And right now it's the exact opposite. The press is being used to make sure that the truth is secluded, that it's not getting out.
Yeah. Now, JD, kind of going along with what Sam was just talking from a policy standpoint. What are some of the things that we as conservatives should really be focused on coming out of coronavirus, again, to make sure that something like what we've experienced over the last few months never happens again?
So 2 things. Number one, there is we have to do a purge, so to speak. There's going to be lingering mandates, lingering portions of executive orders, even lingering laws that are sitting there and they're kind of going under the radar. I think I've talked about this before. The mayor, I don't remember somewhere in Indiana, I believe, who had worked into her executive order the ability for her to essentially suspend sales of guns and ammunition. At her whim. It had nothing to do with the coronavirus. It was inserted into a coronavirus emergency executive order. But again, she made it, and she had said it through fiat. She had said it as a permanent power given to her as mayor. Things like that need to be wiped. We need to find whatever these remnants of the bad things are and get rid of them. But the second thing is arguably the most important. There's going to be legislation. Call it 50 different types of legislation that are going to be maybe 100. And I'm not talking about just everything that's proposed. I'm talking about things that are going to have legitimate chances of making it to the floor, making it through the entire Capitol Hill and hitting the president's desk. And these are going to be pieces of legislation that are guised, shrouded, smoke screened in pandemic preparedness, pandemic, recovery systems, whatever. These are going to be monstrosities. There's going to always be something either hidden or outright in them that needs to be opposed. We know this is going to be the case because we've already had, we've given DC, or DC has given itself, a taste of modern monetary theory in the form of their first 2.2 trillion, then the 475 billion. Now they're proposing a 3 trillion, which will again end up somewhere in the 1.5 trillion dollar range. But it's still going. We're still talking with a T instead of a B or an M or even a thousands, as legislation really should be from Capitol Hill, especially considering where we are on the debt and the budget. But either way, point being is that they have now had this taste, and they're going to try to use this to push forward monstrosities of legislation, things that are supposed to keep us safe, that are supposed to protect us, that are supposed to protect the vulnerable, that are going to, they'll start talking about climate change. What we have ahead of us is going to be a tremendous challenge, arguably bigger than what we're facing today. Today we've got to fight lockdowns. We've got to fight these mandates. Okay, that's almost nothing. I mean, most of these lockdowns and mandates, if you can get to the state Supreme Court like they did in Wisconsin, like they did in Oregon, I mean, even far left Oregon, the Supreme Court was like, no, it's very clear. You had 28 days. You put out your executive order. Okay, it could last for 28 days. In that 28 days, you got to get the state legislature to extend it, because you can't, as governor, you can't do it. And the Supreme Court shot down her executive order. Same thing happened in Wisconsin, like I said. So executive orders, easy to get rid of. Legislation passed on Capitol Hill, signed by the president, much, 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 much harder to get rid of. Okay, don't forget, the Patriot Act was only going to be a temporary thing. Okay, so, and here we are 20 years later. We still have the USA Freedom Act, which is just a rebranded Patriot Act. So if we thought that the Patriot Act was bad, imagine 50 of them, all of which are more powerful, more expensive, and greater restrictions on our rights, and sold to the American people as a way to keep us protected from the next time. Never forget the coronavirus crisis, and never forget grandma and all this other stuff. That's a huge risk, and that's going to happen.
Yeah. Now, I the thing that is really making me nervous, kind of moving forward, is I feel like like you were saying, like we've pretty much crossed the line now, right? And so now it's like we set a precedence that this is a way to kind of deal with like national emergencies and worldwide emergencies and things like that. So now we've got climate change, which again, I think we've all kind of talked about off and on, on our own shows and writing about and things like that. But I mean, can either one of you guys foresee them using these measures to combat climate change? Because I mean, in all reality, we're out here in California. We're seeing it's less smoggy. There's less cars out on the road. Like, the air is cleaner. Like literally, we walked out by the beach. We're like, it smells cleaner. Like, could we see lockdowns and shutdowns to be able for them to say like, hey, let's reset the climate?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one thing that we have to pay the left their dues, which I guess is a little ironic when you think about labor unions. They're absolutely experts at exploiting situations. Never let a crisis go to waste. Absolutely experts at it. And of course, they're going to use this for all kinds of different things. I mean, we need to see, with all of their agendas, see how they're progressing. I mean, right now, one of the worst things, and something that we're not even thinking about as conservatives, is that we've given the left all this time to stay at home, and they're all on Zoom meetings and everything like that. All the activists talking amongst themselves, talking about how they're going to go and take over the world after this thing, because that's what they do all the time. That's part of their regular routine, and it definitely hasn't changed during coronavirus. And so that's what they're going to be doing is going to be seeing how they can exploit these kind of things. Something that we need to do to make sure this doesn't happen is that we need to remember, and we need to be really sending in letters, sending in emails, making phone calls to our representation and challenging our representation on this, that they don't believe in judicial positivism, that they don't believe in the fact that precedent is what creates law, and that precedent is what creates authority, because that's not what it is. And I mean, first of all, it's a ridiculous standard to look at a precedent. I understand why precedent is there. I'm not saying that there's no reason for precedent, but people go and are like, well, because we use this law that goes against the Constitution, I guess that just makes the Constitution null and void. Well, that's not how it works. That was just a wrong law. that the Supreme Court should go and overturn or something like that if it goes against the Constitution. And people should be standing against it, which is absolutely important. And people need to be talking about this whole idea of what actually is our authority, what actually is our law, and going back to those kind of things and making sure our representation knows that, because just because somebody was voted into office doesn't mean that they know these things, let alone know the Constitution. Because I think that's one thing we're finding is that several of our representatives, several of our executive office people, mayors, governors, either they don't care about the Constitution, or a lot of people maybe on the right might not even know it, who have been elected. We don't make anybody take a constitutional test before they take office.
Maybe we should, so it's an idea. So one, we'll have one last question, and then we'll have kind of like a call to action. But JD, I kind of want to ask you. As we're going forward, we're looking at this weekend. We're looking at churches are supposed to be open according to Trump. Do you think that we're going to have a fight with the governors, or do you think the governors are going to be like, okay, we're tired of this. Let's just get this over with? Like, are we going to see this? Do you feel like we're going to see this escalate into Trump versus Gavin Newsom or Cuomo or any of these leftist governors?
So this is the fight they've wanted for a long time. And they know that their base has, I don't want to make a blanket accusation, but generally speaking, a majority in their base, in the Democratic Party's base, has abandoned faith, abandoned God. And they know that they can make this issue a real fight, try to turn it more humanistic than anything else. So yes, are they going to fight it? Absolutely. They're going to fight it. They're going to oppose it. Now, how far they take it will depend upon the reactions of the people. Okay. They know they've got their base locked down. Okay. Their base is all like, hey, you know what? Coronavirus, no coronavirus. We should just close down those damn racist churches, right? That's a lot of their perspectives. But if the independents and the moderate Republicans, and if there's enough people who say, wait a second, no, President Trump's right, we need to open up these churches, yada, yada, yada. That's the only thing that can make them back down. Otherwise, they're going to fight this all the way. And you're actually going to see, in my opinion, you're going to see, this, we've watched it many times, this whole, rooting for bad things. We saw it with them rooting against the economy for the first 3 years of the president's administration. They were hoping, begging, pleading, sometimes quietly, sometimes openly, hoping for devastation to the economy so that they can say, aha, see, this is all Trump's fault. We've seen them root for, I don't remember the exact incident, but it's like there was a mass shooting and somebody prominent had tweeted, oh gosh, I hope that was a white Christian who just killed a bunch of people or something to that effect. We see them rooting for bad things. Well, this is an example of once the president fights them and once they lose, because they will lose. Okay, this is a battle that they cannot win. Once they lose, then you will see Democrats, you will see the left, you will see the radical progressives rooting for and cheering on the coronavirus to kill church people. We're seeing it on Twitter today. This is before the president's announcement. I was watching an entire Twitter thread where it's basically they were talking about that church that Sam had mentioned earlier in Mississippi that had gotten burnt down, and they were talking about, it was I'm not even going to repeat it. It was very ugly. But the point is that the people on the left that were making this argument in this thread were saying, you deserve to die, essentially. And we hope that you do to prove our point, basically, that the churches should stay closed. That's going to be the dividing line. Okay, that's going to be the left versus right going forward. I know that you wanted this to be quick, but I want to make it one more point regarding this. I was very, very hopeful, even prayerful, that Bernie Sanders would win the nomination for the Democrats. The reasoning wasn't because I thought that Bernie was going to be any easier or harder than Biden or Bloomberg or anybody. I wanted this nation to have the conversation regarding socialism, because until socialism, the way that Bernie Sanders envisions it, until it is addressed on a national scale in a head-to-head general election for presidents, until the Democrats have a serious socialist as their nominee, it's always going to linger. The only way to kill it is if we are able to fight our truth, the real truth, versus what they're pawning off as truth. That's the only way to kill socialism is for Sanders. So I was like, oh, please let it be Sanders. Please let it be, or even Warren. Let it be somebody like that so that we can have this national debate about socialism. So we can finally kill it, at least for the next 10, 15, 20 years, right? I prayed about it. God, he is much smarter than I am. I'm not ashamed to admit that. And in his wisdom, he knew the coronavirus was coming. And if the president does end up winning, we will be able to look back at this day, at May 22nd, as the time when the real battleground, for the heart and soul of America, where the line was drawn. And this is it. Because going forward, for at least a portion of this election cycle, at least through the coronavirus, and if there is a resurgence, it's going to be a debate over faith in America, over the First Amendment. And that is much, much more important of a discussion to have at a national scale than debating socialism versus capitalism, socialism versus freedom. Our right as Christians, as a Christian nation, as a Judeo-Christian founded nation, our rights are going to be on one side. Okay, that's going to be the side that embraces Trump. And on the other side, you will have the Democrats, Joe Biden, Gavin Newsom, whoever the actual presidential nominee, whoever the vice presidents are, they're going to side with the opposite. They're going to say, look, we believe in science. Churches should have stayed closed. Now we're having this resurgence of the coronavirus, the second wave. It's getting worse. People are dying. Grandmas are dying, and this is all Trump's fault. Who wins that debate will determine, in my opinion, who the next president is. And I am so thankful that this is the debate we're having instead of socialism. I was dead wrong. Then again, I also didn't foresee the coronavirus the way that Bill Gates and Dr. Fauci did.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain degree, they're almost like prophets. They called it what Bill Gates called it years ago. This is crazy. So one last question came in on Facebook comments, and I'll put this to you, Sam. Robert Ryder in the comments, he said, How and when do we enforce the Constitution? And I think it's a good question because I think as conservatives, oftentimes we're like you and I. We're sitting here. I've got no vote. I've got no power. But we all sit here and we're complaining. Look, that's not constitutional. How do you not see it? Like it's right there, written, and we see these governors completely contradicting it. How do we enforce it? Like what do we have to do in order to make the Constitution the law again?
Right. So there's a couple different steps. And actually, I'm going to play off of one thing that JD said here. He said that Trump probably wouldn't be actually enforcing this on the governors and physically enforcing it. And I agree with that statement totally. But I also agree with JD where he says that we are going to see this fight. We've already seen it with Cuomo and Trump. So they're going to get into it. Newsom, they're going to get into it. It's going to be, kind of a street fight. But the thing is that it's only going to be on the media. They're only going to go back and forth in interviews and tweets and, all that kind of stuff is how I see it going down. But the big thing about what Donald Trump did, what President Trump did, is that he gives a lot more legal traction and a lot more teeth for people to actually make lawsuits right now and to put out lawsuits. In fact, I was just talking to a pastor earlier today saying, you might want to consider your legal actions you can take against your governor for this. Well, I'll tell you what, he really should be looking at that if the governor keeps in their state keeps on shutting down churches because that governor came out and said recently that they're probably not going to have church for the rest of the year. And we look at this, what President Trump did is that he gives pastors right now, especially, and churches especially, an ability to take this to the court. And just like JD pointed out, even in the liberal state of Oregon, the Supreme Court justices there came out and they're like, hey, yeah, the law is the law. It is what it is. And so right now, this is how we go and we start enforcing the Constitution, is that pastors have to step up and they have to go and take this legally and start suing the states that remain closed. And so what you need to do as citizens and as church members is, hey, maybe you're somebody who has never gone to church. Maybe you're somebody who you're just a patriot, but you don't know Jesus Christ as your Savior whatsoever. Let me tell you, now is the time. If you care about your Constitution, President Trump just put it in the pastor's hands to save the Constitution. If the Constitution falls, it's the pastor's fault because they didn't take this and they didn't take legal action. President Trump just put it in their court. Whether you are completely secular, whether you are a diehard Christian, whatever you are, this is the reality that we're living in now. And so you need to go and be calling up your pastor and be like, hey, our church is still shut down. Our governor's still shutting down churches. The president said this. This is what the Constitution says. You're going to put your big boy pants on and go take this and take some legal action, or are you going to sit on the sideline and have false piety and say, oh, woe is me? No, it's not time for, oh, woe is me. It's time to raise the word of God. It's called a sword for a reason, and it's time to fight, because ultimately, spiritually, we're talking about, this is demonic, shutting down churches. This isn't a secular thing. Ultimately, whether the people know it or not that are being used and making these orders or whatnot, that's Satan's realm. He doesn't want the church going on here. But constitutionally, pastors have an opportunity to defend the Constitution, or we have an opportunity to throw it away right now. That's President Trump just put it in our court. I hope there's enough virtue in the pulpit.
Yeah, no,
Amen.
Absolutely, and I think that's to a certain degree as well. Where it kind of comes back to what we've got going on with the American conservative movement is all four of us co-founders, including Ken Peters, who wasn't able to be here today, but we're all believers in Jesus Christ. We're all Christians, but we're still looking at this from a political standpoint. We're looking at this like, okay, we got to get conservative values out there. We got to get these principles out there. We got to defend the Constitution and things like that. And so that's why we've got this podcast. That's why we've got the organization. We've got our upcoming Saving America conference coming up on May 30th. So make sure you guys mark your calendars for that. The last couple that we've had, I think we're averaging about 25,000 people per conference right now. I mean, it's been extremely encouraging seeing the response to all this.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's huge. It's I remember when we had the first one, I was like, man, I hope we get at least 5,000. So yeah, it's a big thing.
Yeah. Now, okay. So if people want to get involved with ACM and they want to either be in the loop with what's going on, they want to financially support, just encourage or help us get the word out or whatever it is, what's the best way for people to do that?
So during the conference, we will be having SavingAmericaConference.com available for people to be able to participate. In the meantime, we're going to be putting up a lot more content, especially over this weekend. Content from previous conferences, as well as brand new content up on AmericanConservativeMovement.com. Of course, if you're watching this, chances are you already know that our Facebook URL is facebook.com/AmericanConservatism. You can also find us on Instagram as well as Twitter at AmConMovement. So at AmConMovement. Those are the best places to find us, and we do need your support now more than ever. Yeah, it's funny because Pastor Sam I had never thought about that in that way, that this is really, President Trump has essentially made it to where the defenders of the Constitution are the men and women who are waving around their Bibles. And folks, as much doom and gloom as I was saying before, when we look at it from that perspective, wow, this is awesome. I mean, this is the best news possible at a time like this, to be able to take our faith and use our faith as our sword for our nation. I mean, it's a perfect storm of patriotic Christian faithful conservatism, all wrapped up in a big gigantic apple pie. Yeah, this is awesome. I need to go jogging or get my hair cut or something. This is really great.
Yeah, and again,
got a lot of energy from that.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even need an espresso or energy drink. Just you're good to go. So yeah, and everybody as well. If you're watching, make sure you subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, If you're watching on YouTube or even here on Facebook, definitely like, subscribe, all the good stuff. Leave us a 5-star review. It really helps us to be able to get found, helps with algorithms, helps with all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely very much appreciated if you can do that. So again, whichever platform you are happening to find us on, make sure you do that. It really helps. And then again, go to AmericanConservativeMovement.com, sign up for the email list, and we'll definitely be keeping you in the loop with what's going on, and just join the movement. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do, is unify conservatives around a constitutional perspective and really bring back freedom to our country. It's what we really need. So thanks, Sam. Thanks, JD, for coming on here. Glad we could do this. It's always, I feel like it's one of those things where with the news and everything that's going on, we could almost hop on here every single day. There'd be something brand new. But I thought this was an important thing for us to talk about. So thanks so much for coming on.
Amen.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff. Can I say one quick thing here?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm sorry, yes.
If go and look up on Amazon A Storm, a Message, a Bottle. Buy the book. It's by Pastor Kerry Gordon. And if you don't like to read, buy it for your pastor. This is what woke me up, this book, to one of the big things that woke me up into being a constitutional Christian, not just a Christian, but really getting involved. And this will give your pastor the roadmap as to how to actually defend our Constitution. And what he was saying we needed is exactly what President Trump today did, giving us that opportunity. That book is essential right now.
Definitely. Definitely check that out. I'll definitely have to put that order in as soon as we're done here. So, but yeah, everybody, again, thanks so much for tuning in. If there's ever a piece of news, that's coming back, we'll pop back on here and do another episode of the ACM podcast. But again, thanks for all of your support. Thanks for tuning in, and just keep defending the Constitution. Keep getting the word out. Do whatever you can, small, big, whatever it is. Just do something. It'll help us head in the right direction. So otherwise, we'll see you guys next time.